Leveling endlessly with the strongest system. Chapter 1. Prologue, The Great Sun Empire. In the far west exist objects desired by many, for they contain limitless power. Soul shards, as the Westerners like to say, can grant mere villages the strength to raise boulders and hurl them at their enemies. But that was the level of strength that even an untrained beggar can gain by merging with the lowest quality soul shard. As for higher quality soul shards, they granted humans the physical and magical power to contend against beasts, monsters, and horrifying creatures, which have haunted them since the beginning of time. With human greed in play, soul shards have been the main cause of many wars. Every kingdom with one or two higher quality soul shards appearing in its lands, but not possessing enough strength to safeguard it or not having a citizen worthy enough to hold it, has faced the same fate as its predecessors. They were targeted and annihilated by those eyeing the shards and eventually became a dim part of ancient history. On the other hand, the kingdoms that survived the turbulent times that the appearance of a high-level soul shard brought to their land raised to become a major power in the world. Or even an empire. Such was the story of the Great Sun Empire. A divine shard made its sudden appearance in its land. The day it appeared, the sky turned red as if mirroring the river of blood, and the blue river passing through the Sun Kingdom and connecting to its four neighbors took the vibrant color of grainfield. It brought along significant changes in the world to tell the five kings of the far west where it was and what it was, also that it could fan the fire of greed in their hearts and make them start the so-called Cold War. Bloodshed, that was what it wanted to cause. Innocent or not, knight or not, it wanted to see humans killing each other with cold steel and vibrant magic spells. It wanted to dance to the cries of despair coming out of the tender mouths of young orphans and desperate mongrels, for they were like melodies to its soul. It hoped to drown its soul in the intoxicating smell of blood and rust that would fill the air as the result of the bloody war. It was a divine shard for sure, but one containing evil consciousness. 3 of the 4 kings overlooked not only the peace treaty they had with the Sun King, but also the horror and damage of the past wars from which they were yet to recover, and attacked the Sun Kingdom with the hopes of stealing its land and the soul shard and enslaving its people to gain a large number of laborers. 3 birds with 1 stone. What more could they possibly ask for? Such a golden opportunity was not going to knock on their doorsteps twice. Thus, they attacked the Sun Kingdom after joining hands for the first time. However, even with the combined forces of the 3 kingdoms, they failed to topple the Sun Kingdom. On top of that, they had to become a part of the Sun Kingdom to appease the Sun King, who had merged with the divine shard for which they were fighting and gained unimaginable power. Fearing utter destruction, they submitted to him reluctantly. The only kingdom that didn't attack when 3 others were invading it also willingly became a part of the Sun Kingdom under the enticement of the Sun King. The day the 5 kingdoms became one, the far west gained an empire and an emperor. Leveling endlessly with the strongest system. Chapter 2, The Count of Wealth and Power. Many heroes emerged during the warring era, but the ones that stood out the most were the 3 heavenly knights, Badulf, the 4 dukes, and the Great Sun Emperor. Out of them, only Badulf, the savage sword, started from humble beginnings. He was from the Mountain Clan, a native of the White Lands found in the northern part of the empire. He was brighter and far more robust than his fellow clansmen, who only knew how to hunt beasts in the jungle and trade their strong hide for basic essentials necessary to survive the 5 months of cold, harsh winter. Unwilling to waste his life in the far north of the empire, he left his clan behind and became a wanderer. During the daytime, he would kill monsters hiding in the great forest. At night, he would eliminate evil bandits for the bounty on their heads. As a result, his weekly income was so much that his peers' eyes burned with jealousy. He didn't feel good, though, as he wanted a special status, far greater than a mere wanderer. But the status of a noble wasn't a cabbage on a roadside stall that one could purchase in exchange for a few coins. What one needed to become a noble was to make sacrifices for the kingdom's sake and earn contribution points numbering in thousands. In those days, participating in the war and killing the enemy's soldiers was the fastest way for a mere wanderer to gain contribution points in large quantities. Badulf, willing to embrace all hardships to realize his desires, joined the war and eventually made a name for himself by advancing to the rank of sword masters and beheading the vice-commander-in-chief of the enemy's army. The war ended soon after, for the Great Sun Emperor subdued and merged with the evil divine shard, gained unparalleled power, and entered the battlefield like a god of war, butchering thousands of enemies with each of his attacks. After the war, the Great Sun awarded Badulf the status of a count, a county, and a beautiful princess. As per the emperor's will, he was to oversee 18 villages and some important mines. The emperor trusted him with so much, not only because of the contributions he made in the war but also because he was a swordmaster. One of the villages grew rare tea leaves. Tea made from them had a refreshing scent and mind-calming ability. They weren't popular because they had never gained enough attention from a man of value. Badolf, believing they held extreme value, made a fortune by buying them from the villagers at the market price and selling them to nobles and people of influence. The effects of these tea leaves spread among the noble and upper circle of the empire like wildfire, and because of their affordable cost, they quickly became a favorite of the tea-drinking community. At the same time, Badolf drafted and signed a contract with the villagers, stating that he would give the villagers 30% of the profit if they continued to grow and harvest every year and sold the leaves only to him. He didn't force them. The villagers readily agreed with his demands. The contract stated they would get 30% of the profit. That meant they would be earning more than they ever had in their entire life in mere months. Merely a week later, many, including the emperor and the left and right prime ministers, urgently requested Badolf to transport these tea leaves to the capital, and he did just that. For he was making 3 times the money by selling them to the capitalist of the capital than the nobles close to or in his county. Soon, anyone dealing with paperwork wanted to get their hands on it. The village he was overseeing was good land to grow these leaves. For some reason, these tea leaves couldn't grow well in other places. The quality was low, the effects of the tea made of them were far worse than Badolf's, and they tended to go bad in even a good environment very soon. Some did try to grow them after seeing the count making huge profits, but the loss outweighed the profit they were making, and hence they stopped. While Badolf had a monopoly in this trade, he didn't start selling it at a ridiculous price to avoid offending the few at the top who could get rid of him sneakily. Most members of the upper circle became addicted to the peace and calmness drinking the tea brought them, and they became the regular customers of his commercial house. Gradually, he rolled in wealth in his pockets and county, becoming prosperous with his people. He gained the admiration of the nobles and the respect of the emperor after he became rich on top of being a swordmaster. He had a sharp brain and an overwhelming strength, so no one dared look down on him anymore. Even though he was of an insignificant family, the noble treated him like a lord. By the time he was in his mid-30s, he had become a wealthy and respected noble of the empire. His personal life wasn't bad either. He had 3 beautiful wives. Each of his wives was a top-notch beauty, and he loved them dearly. He never held back from giving them whatever they desired. His first wife used to be a mercenary like him. His second wife was a princess. And his last wife was a dancer with a charming figure and a snake-like waist. Her seductive movements never failed to ignite lust in his heart. Although this wife of his, with great beauty, enchanting eyes, and unnatural seductive techniques, the like of which would charm any man, had died, he still had 2 others to take care of him and satisfy his every need, and hence he didn't feel the need to marry a 4th time. Moreover, his wives had given him a son each, and his second wife had given him a daughter too. His eldest son had taken after him, making him immensely proud. He had showcased a talent for the sword at a young age. He had learned how to manifest aura at the age of 18. That same year, he became an official knight. The people in the empire were already calling him a future sword master. His second son was still not of age yet, but Badolf was proud of him, too, for he had awed the world by revealing the strength of a rank 3 mage and earned the right to join the empire's mage academy. His daughter, as per the emperor's command, had become the concubine of the crown prince a day after she reached the age of 18. She was so beautiful that even the crown prince couldn't resist the desire to hold her. Because of her, Badolf had strengthened his ties with the royal family. His last son was the child he had with his dancer of a wife, who had died nearly a decade ago. And to Badolf, this 3rd son of his was his greatest mistake. Leveling endlessly with the strongest system. Chapter 3, the Count's infamous 3rd son, Roy Badolf Baldwin. In Baldwin, where the winters are long and freezing and the summers are almost non-existent, warm breezes began blowing at exactly 2 p.m. They were a byproduct of a magic formation that protected the city from natural disasters such as ice storms. It also converted cold breezes passing through the dome-like barrier surrounding the city into warm air before storing it in a wind pouch. From 2 p.m. till 7 p.m., it would release the captured winds into the county every day under the supervision of the county's mages, such as now. Some people stepped out of their homes with wet but washed clothes, for the warm winds blowing through the streets and alleys were also a signal telling them that the time to dry their laundry had come. They hung wet clothes on clotheslines tied between buildings. The wind made their clothes flutter like leaves rustling in the wind. Then, they left home to earn money. Most, if not all, were not in a hurry to dry their clothes as they had the ability to clean their clothes within minutes with magic and knew those warm gales of wind would dance throughout the city from 2 p.m. to 7 p.m. Instead of doing tiresome work, they walked through the streets made of fine tiles of stones, relaxing their stiff joints. It has long become a habit of theirs to enjoy the warmth of the sun in the coldest and harshest region of the empire, as the Count introduced such comfort in their lives several years ago. It was the time of day that induced relaxation and chattiness into the well-off people, and hence, they entered the pub and began gossiping about the most recent happening in the county. Some did so while drinking beer in broad daylight. I can't explain how much I envy the Count with words only. He has 2 beautiful wives with impressive backgrounds. His eldest daughter is the most beloved concubine of the Crown Prince, while his first son is already a full-fledged knight. Furthermore, rumors have it that his second son will be joining the Mage Academy this year. They are bound to bring glory to his home and help him solidify his position in the court. Everything's playing out well for him. I, on the other hand, have a fat wife and a stupid son who wastes away his days studying the structure of basic-level magic runes. This man, who was drunk and bad-mouthing his family, overlooked all the troubles of the Count and only counted his blessings. But the ones next to the man weren't the same as him. Rather, they were fans of the Count and knew too well about the things troubling him and the sacrifices he had made to make life better for Far West's northerners like them. The Count is not as lucky as you think. His life is full of trouble. He has to do paperwork every day and lead a team of knights and mages to subjugate monsters in the parts of the Great Forest near the county every winter. Unlike you, he also has a salted fish in his family who likes to eat, and eat. This fellow is right. The youngest master of the Count's family has no ambition or inspiration. He's born to the Count but has never held a sword and doesn't have a talent for magic either. He's 16 years old yet has still not done anything remarkable. Conrad speaks the truth. He's nothing like his siblings. Instead of fame, his infamy has spread throughout the empire. Even the outsiders know him as a smelly fatty. He's the black sheep of the Count's family. Drunken man, I believe you know the Count has given much to the well-known Charlotte family in order to marry his youngest to the young miss. But just yesterday, Miss Rose sent her servant to return the engagement token and an engagement invalidation letter with her signature on it to the Count. She didn't appear herself and rather let her people announce to the Count her desire to annul her engagement with his dumb child. Her actions are like slapping the county's youngest master in the face and also humiliating the Count if we take into consideration the difference in their status. She has a nasty personality. Well, she isn't in the wrong either. Miss Rose is expected to become an archmage in the future. What does that entail? She is like the most brilliant budding seed. Once she realizes her talent and bloom, she might outshine everyone except the great sun. Why would she not feel angered after knowing she is to marry a pig? Although I like the Count, I do think her attitude towards him and his son is justified. Po. Caching. Pa. Pa. Suddenly, a drunken bard stumbled into the pub and, using his rusty flute, played a broken melody that was so jarring to the ears that the crowd booed and cursed him to the highest heaven. Worried that the owner might kick him out if he continued to play, he came to an immediate stop. You, did you hear about it? Hick. The Count family's youngest, jumped into a cold pond last night. That's what my wife said to me when we were having breakfast at the table this morning. She said he tried to commit suicide because he was heartbroken after finding out that his fiancée didn't want him anymore. Does that even make sense? He had never met her, and there existed no love between these two kids. They aren't anywhere close to the word intimate. Why would he go so far as to commit suicide to get her attention? I think the Count is likely hiding the real reason why he jumped into the pond. As for what it is, we commoner folks might never know. You're in luck today. An insider told me he took way too many drugs that day. He must have mistaken the pond as his bed and jumped into it. Don't tell others that I told you that. Otherwise, I will do my all to bring you with me to the chopping stands. Worry not. My lips are sealed. Well, if the drug he took is the ecstasy pill, then it might very well be possible. Someone sighed. The Count is super unlucky to have that trash as his son. The drunk man furrowed his brows. After discovering his life isn't as perfect as I thought, I envy him less. At this moment, the eyes of the one they were gossiping about fluttered open. He was lying on a soft bed and wearing a one-piece robe with golden linen foreign to him. 4 blankets covered him, warming him enough to make him sweat. Under the thick coverings, he felt suffocated. He threw him off himself and sat up. The room was hot as a fireplace but not smoky. Still, the temperature of the room was high enough to make him feel uncomfortable. His chest felt stuffy, a feeling he was unfamiliar with as he had never had a delightful meal in his life or stuffed his gut to the fullest. The other thing he was unfamiliar with was the room he was in currently. He looked to his left and then his right in bewilderment. After taking in his surroundings, the confusion in his beady eyes tripled. He was certain he had died. So what was he doing in a fancy but uncomfortably hot room? Leveling endlessly with the strongest system. Chapter 4, Waking Up in Foreign Land. The soul inside the young man with the beady eyes belonged to none other than Roy Fisher. Roy Fisher lived in a world that was getting invaded by beasts. He didn't have much to do with it as he was just a trainee aiming to become a hunter. At midnight, after reading a fantasy novel, he went out and bought a cup of ramen and 2 sausages from the nearby 7-Eleven. While on his way back home, he, unfortunately, encountered a dungeon break. A hole opened close to him, and a monster walked out of it on all 4. They made eye contact. After what felt like a torturous year to him, it attacked him. Then, let's just say he was no more. Roy still vividly remembered how while keeping him pressed beneath its claws to make it impossible for him to crawl away, it tore his legs apart in an instant and chewed them. He couldn't run away, and he couldn't crawl away. He could do nothing but watch it eat him limb by limb. After it ate away his limbs while enjoying listening to his mournful and painful ear-wrenching cries, it brought its mouth close to his face. The sensation of what happened after was still haunting him, making him sweat faster. He thought people would see their life flash by when they were going to die. But nothing of that sort happened to him when the monster bit his head off his shoulder. Maybe he died too fast. Or maybe those old fogies were all liars. Roy cursed beneath his breath. When he remembered the last moment of his life, he forgot to breathe for a second. Didn't I just die in the mouth of a monster that I unlucky came across on my way back home? Then what am I doing in this room? Is this the afterlife? He murmured, but his personal maid still heard him. What a horrible thing to say, my lord. Did you have a nightmare? Just now, Roy noticed a young lady close to his rather big bed. As she was previously lying on the wooden floor and he could hardly bend his neck down for some reason, he overlooked her. She had ruby-like eyes and black hair. And she was looking at him with tired but worried-filled eyes as if she was not a stranger to him, but his dearly beloved who would die out of sadness if something happened to him. He was surprised, to say the least, because she was cosplaying a maid. He had always desired to see a maid in real life, but who could have guessed that his wish would be fulfilled after his death? Wait, when did maids start appearing in the afterlife? Something's off here. Roy's eyes widened, and he looked at the maid amicably. Who are you? Why are you dressed like a maid? And where is this? He spoke softly so as not to scare her off. Now, it was the maid's turn to be struck silly like her young master. Quote. They both gawked at each other like monkeys eyeing their reflection in the mirror in horror for a few moments before the maid broke off the silence by touching his forehead and taking his temperature. Your fever has died down. But why are you still acting strange? Could it be you hit your head when you jumped into the pool and forgot your memories? Yes, I can't remember anything. The silly maid received a nod of the head from her young master. Roy, for now, decided to play along with her. He couldn't do much in this situation. He found out that even moving his body was too much for him. You're the 3rd scion of Badulf, the most famous count in the Great Sun Empire, and the only son of Lady Florence, and I am your maid, gifted to you by Her Highness. She went on to tell him about all the important things he should know. It was after half an hour that, thanks to the help of his gullible maid, Roy not only understood that he was in no afterlife and that he had transmigrated into the body of the youngest son of the most famous count in the empire. Last night, he had soaked in cold water for too long and thus had gotten sick. She looked out for him all night. Roy felt a little happy. He had always lived a hard life because he was an orphan. Never in his dreams could he have imagined that he would die, only to wake up and find out that he had become the son of a wealthy man. He could live a life of luxury now. The only thing bad about him was his figure and face. Well, money should be able to solve all his problems, no. Can you bring me a mirror? Roy had discerned he was fat and ugly from the maid's words. But he was curious about just how fat he had to be to struggle even to move and how ugly he must be to make his fiancée cancel her engagement with him after getting a good look at his face. Yes, I will bring one to you right away. Although she was reluctant to leave her amnesiac young master all by himself, the maid still nodded her head, urged by his pleading gaze. The black hair covering her brows and the area down below lifted up, and Roy caught a glimpse of the dark circles under her eyes. Immediately he realized that she had stayed awake all night to take care of him, and when she couldn't take it anymore, she collapsed next to his bed. How could she be so ferociously loyal to her failure of a young master? If I were to serve a silly young master, I wouldn't work as hard as her. She is also underpaid and overworked. Yet, she holds no desire to complain to anyone at all. A hard-working young woman like her deserves a better life. The sound of footsteps going away snapped him out of his monologue. He raised his head and saw her sliding open only enough for her to slip out. You've worked hard. Before she could go out, she heard her young master's words full of gratefulness. She felt happy as, for the first time in many years, he hadn't turned a blind eye to her and had recognized her efforts. Her lips stretched back into a smile. She was unconscious to it. She turned back to him with a genuine smile still visible on her face. "Thank you." Roy was mesmerized by her smile. Even though he had said only a few words, it was enough to make her happy. He had never met an honest person like her in his entire life. Her face was like a real-time translator of her emotions. Her every emotion and thought was visible on her cute peach-like face. He only got to see her smile for a second as she closed the door immediately so that the cold wind outside wouldn't invade the room and kiss her fragile and sickly young master. A while after, she sneaked into the room with a medium-sized mirror in her hands that she was struggling to hold. "Young master, I have brought the mirror." She was looking at him with the desire to hear him praise her. Roy, with nothing much to do, fulfilled her desire. "Good. Place it here." Roy hurriedly patted the empty spot close to him, and she placed it on the bed next to him. He looked at his reflection in the mirror, and his eyes widened. He was fat, and not just fat but extremely obese. He was no less than 550 pounds. That weight for a 5 feet 7 inches wasn't unhealthy, it was life-threatening. On a scale of 1 to 5, he was at 5, on the verge of exploding. Hey! He's not as bad looking as the young miss of the Charlotte family made him out to be. He was fat but not ugly. His eyes were beady, but only because there was too much fat around his eyes and on his face. He could discern that behind all that fat hid a handsome face. Ah! While he was looking at his reflection, a great pain stabbed his brain. He clutched his head and cried out like a little girl who had her candy stolen by the neighbor's kid. A great deal of information flew into his brain, showing him the memories of Roy Badolf Baldwin, whose soul he could feel merging with him. The pain he was feeling increased by 2 folds, and his cries got louder. Looking at his miserable state, his maid also cried. "My lord, are you feeling pained? Should I call the doctor?" Roy heard Amelia cry out in worry for him. She had no surname as her family had abandoned her on the streets when she was but a child. Dressed in shaggy clothes, she would have died that winter day if not for his mother, who picked her up and brought her to a place too warm, which in turn was the same as giving her a second chance at life. Amelia was loyal to him for a reason. His mother had treated her like her own. To repay her, she was willing to waste away the rest of her life serving him. No need. Roy helped her sit close to him and wiped the tears from her eyes. She was too emotionally fragile when it came to him. "I am fine." He patted her shoulder to reassure her that nothing was wrong with him. She gazed at him without a hint of disgust. "What just happened? I seem to have remembered everything." "Really?" she shouted out, her eyes brightening up in joy. "Yes, Amelia. So there's no need to trouble yourself with calling the family doctor." She hadn't told him her irrelevant name so far after he lost his memories, so hearing him call out to her helped her confirm that he was no longer an amnesiac. The maid immediately fell to her knees, thanked the Great Sun, and started praising the god of the Great Sun Empire. Roy's eyes narrowed. The setting of this world was similar to the novel he had finished reading the day he died. The sun was the most followed god in the far west and people here could use magic and aura. Leveling endlessly with the strongest system. Chapter 5, Amelia. Everything Roy had learned about the Count, the Empire, and himself from the maid became clearer after his soul merged with the true owner of this body. I have become the citizen of an empire that existed in a novel. He found out that he was in the Great Sun Empire that lorded over the far west, one of the 4 continents of a world too huge. As for its name, the people of the Far East had 3 names for it. They were News, 3, and Ard. However, Roy knew this world was nothing more than an ancient battlefield of the gods. He also understood that he was not famous like his father, but an infamous piece of shit, who everyone knew as a waste. Amelia has kept some things hidden from him so he would not feel pained. He was, in fact, no genius and just a stupid little fool that was mentally ill. After finding out his fiancée didn't want him anymore, he hid in a corner and cried. Amelia tried to find him, but the one who found him first was his second brother. Noah took him out to the garden to cheer him up. He practiced his magic skills on Roy. One of the spells he cast on him was an illusion spell. After a while of bullying him, his second brother left. But he forgot to remove the spells on him. Because Roy was under an illusion and mentally ill, he failed to differentiate between right from wrong and a bed from a cold pond. He jumped on the cold pond thinking it was his bed. I have transmigrated into the body of a character who should be dead by now. When Roy Badolf Baldwin died, the amulet around his neck sucked in his soul and kept his body functions going. Otherwise, he would have appeared dead to Amelia too. The necklace was similar to the one Roy Fisher had on him all the time back on Earth. It had pulled his soul to this world after the beast killed him and forced him into the body of Roy Baldwin. As for the soul inside the pendant, it has fused with Roy Fisher's. Both of their souls were on the verge of breaking because they had died a violent death. Before they could die, the mighty soul pendant merged his soul with Roy's so that it wouldn't shatter apart and stabilizes. But that also meant that Roy Fisher was now Roy Badolf Baldwin and vice versa. Roy Fisher knew and understood what terror Roy Badolf Baldwin felt as he died because of a damn prank from Noah. I would like to kill that damned brat, but I am completely powerless. It can't be helped. I can only swallow my anger down and let him go for now. Although Roy Badolf Baldwin was the Count's son and now born out of wedlock, Roy thought otherwise. After all, which father wouldn't care about his dying child? Last night, he had frozen to death, but Badolf hadn't thought it necessary to even check up on him. All boys deserve a father, but not all fathers deserve a son. Roy gnashed his teeth, feeling indescribable pain in his heart. But before Amelia could notice his strangeness, he smoothed out his complexion. "Where are you going?" In the entire county, Amelia was most likely his only ally. "My lord, you haven't had a meal for almost a whole day. I will go and see what I can get for you from the chef in the kitchen." Her sudden reminder was enough to make his stomach growl. "I indeed am feeling hungry." Roy placed his hand on his tummy and felt it going in as if it was not fat but air. "Bring whatever you can from the chef and bring extra. Let's have a meal together." He hadn't eaten, nor had she. Amelia felt good knowing that her master was caring for her and smiled after turning her back to him. "I will return in a hurry." She went out of the room without noticing how Roy's eyes had thinned to the size of needles. He had been pinching, pressing, and caressing his overgrown stomach that was thrice the size of a 9-month pregnant, and what he found out from doing that disturbed him greatly. He was able to push his stomach back halfway in. It was the same for the other parts of his body. The fat in his body wasn't natural and more like air. There was something wrong with him. He found out after going through the memories of the person whose soul he had merged with and realizing that he ate like a normal human being. There was not a single day when he had more than 3 meals, but there were many when he had less. However, he was still unbelievably fat. Even if he had a hormone problem, he couldn't have possibly become so fat while eating so less. Roy had a suspicion that someone had put a curse or played magic on him. But who would harm a mentally ill child, and for what reason? The door slid open, and in came Amelia. There were 2 trays in her hands. Each tray had 2 plates, 2 cups, a jug, and a bowl. In total, there were a total of 8 dumplings, 2 pieces of chicken, a sauce, and a drink that would go well with them. Amelia placed them on a table that was heavier than him and tried to move it up to him, but Roy had her let go of it, pick up the trays and place them on the bed directly. As he had ordered her, she couldn't refuse. Roy was so hungry that he picked up the dumpling and took a big bite out of him. It had chicken, meat, a lot of spices, juices, and onions inside of it, and all that flavor bursts into his mouth, sending him to high heaven directly. "Sit beside me and eat." Amelia was just standing beside the bed as if she was ready to pour him a cup of juices when he reached out for the glass. But young master, a slave like me can't eat on the same table as her master. How could he forget? This was an empire with many stupid rules. Some of them were that slaves, maids, and servants couldn't eat the same food as their masters, eat at the same table as their masters, or even wear clothes made of the same material as their masters. Moreover, the slaves followed these rules by heart as if it was some kind of heavenly edict. "This is not a table but a table, so sit here and chow down on these yummy little fluff balls." Roy grabbed her by the palm and gently helped her onto the bed. "But I can't." Although he made her sit close to the food where she couldn't not take in the aroma of the roasted chicken and dumplings and feel hungry, she suppressed her desire to taste chicken and refused to break the Empire's law under his orders. If someone caught them eating together, the family's elders would reprimand her master. She didn't care about how harshly they would punish her, but she couldn't bear to see her young master receiving an earful. "If you don't eat, I won't either." Roy knew what was troubling her, but this place was at the deserted corner of the Count's manor. The number of people passing by at this time of the day was non-existent. Except for them, there would be no one here. So it was all right for her to break a rule or 2 of the Empire. And under his urging and stubborn stance, Amelia, for the first time in her life, broke a silly rule and felt more than a servant. Is it not tasty? The old Roy didn't know how to cherish this person, for he was less intelligent than a kid and more like a blank sheet of paper. But this Roy was going to pay her back for everything she had done for him in the past and also reciprocate her for everything she might do for him in the future. It is. Have one more. Roy stuffed another meaty dumpling covered with sauce in her mouth. You are already at the age where you should get married, but are all skin and bones. Let me tell you this, a woman without much flesh on her is going to have a hard time finding a spouse. You need to eat lots. She swallowed what was in her mouth and jumped down the bed before kneeling on the still warm floor. Please don't throw me away, young master. I don't want to get married. I only hope to remain by your side and serve you till my last breath. She was a bit too paranoid about being abandoned by her loved ones, Roy discerned. He didn't mean what she was thinking, but he didn't mind using her paranoia to his advantage. I won't if you eat till you're satisfied tonight. You mean it? I never lie. I will eat this whole chicken then. That night, the master and his maid ate till they were satisfied. Leveling endlessly with the strongest system. Chapter 6, No Golden Finger. After they both had their fill, Amelia left her young master alone in the room to do the dishes in the kitchen. Left behind was Roy, whose expression turned serious. Who was he? He was the Count's son. He should have a dozen or so servants. Yet surprisingly, there was only one person taking care of him in his most recent memories, and that was Amelia. Except for her, he couldn't recall any servant coming to serve him, even though that was their job. Roy grabbed his head. So far, she is the only one serving me. This is strange. I am the Count's youngest son. On top of that, I need special care because I am supposedly less intelligent than a child. I should have a couple of servants at my beck and call, not just one Amelia. So why is she the only burden with taking care of me and cleaning my clothes and dishes? Roy closed his eyes. I guess I will find out after going through the memories of Roy Badolf Baldwin. He closed his eyes and recalled the foreign memories belonging to the soul that had merged with him a while ago. He went through them quickly and better understood his position in this house. Growing up, Roy Badolf Baldwin showed a great lack of intelligence and thus earned the Count's disdain. When he was only 4, the Count had made it clear that a stupid and powerless fool like him wasn't worthy of being his son. 2 years later, the Count also expressed to him clearly that the reason he was taking care of him was not to let down his wife in heaven. He had little value for the Count and didn't have a bright future. Or any future at all. Knowing this, his step-siblings and evil stepmothers treated him worse than the Count. He didn't have a sound mind and the capability to stand up for himself, and there was no one with status to speak up for him. The servants took advantage of this fact and bullied him behind the back of the Count. When it came to him, they also slacked off. They aren't doing their job properly. That's why Amelia had to overwork so much the previous night that she fainted by my bedside. Those bastards are asking for a beating. Roy cursed the servants of the Count's manor beneath his breath. Hey! What the heck? Amelia went to do the dishes not because she wanted to but because she had to in order to secure food for me. The further Roy went through his memories, the more his expression fell. Because the Count's family and the Count alienated her young master, as well as because the servants bullied him because there was no one to punish them. Amelia had to clean the dishes so as not to get scolded by the kitchen master or have their next meals halted by him. The kitchen master is even shittier than the servants. Considering his actions so far against my maid and me, he doesn't deserve a beating. He deserves death. The dishes of the entire house were to be done by his maid as per the kitchen master's command. One time, Amelia didn't do the dishes because she was feverish. That day, the kitchen master refused not only to give dinner to her, but also her fool of a young master. The old Roy didn't stand up for her or himself. He was so lacking in intelligence that he failed to realize that the kitchen master was bullying them. Amelia was fine with staying hungry for a night, but the mere thought of seeing her young master starve haunted her immensely, and hence she dropped to her knees and begged the kitchen master to give her food for one person. The kitchen master treated her like a dog and threw 2 chicken drumsticks her way. She couldn't catch them, and they fell on the dirty floor. She had seen him coming out of piping hot oil, but she picked him up, scalding her fingers in the process. She wiped the dust off them with her clean hands before bringing them to Roy to eat so he wouldn't sleep with an empty stomach. Ever since that day, she had taken it upon herself to do the dishes so that a similar situation in which her young master might have to go hungry for a night wouldn't occur again. Even the feudal knights of the Great Sun aren't hardcore enough to throw away their pride to fill the stomach of a useless waste like me. Such a fiercely loyal person would shake even the heart of a stone-cold and ruthless man. Roy was just a normal person. He couldn't help but wish for a better life for her. Her loyalty to me is commendable. Roy's eyes warmed, and his heart moved for her. After finding out how much Amelia had sacrificed for him, he promised to treat her like a princess in the future. Roy was no stranger to this continent, for he had read a novel that explained it vividly. There would be no future for them and everyone in the county if he didn't gain enough strength to match up to a sword master in 3 years. The Far West was one of the 5 great areas of this world, and Baldwin County was just a small part of it. Monsters and natural disasters were commonplace in this part of the Great Sun. They weren't enough to cause its downfall. But what if a danger greater than what the Count can contend against attacked the county? What would happen then? According to Roy Badolf Baldwin's memories, he was in the 23rd year of the Great Sun. If the novel was on point, the creature of chaos would invade the far west 3 years later and cause the destruction of Baldwin County and the Count's death. I do not care about the Count, for he had been indifferent to me my whole life. But I must at least keep Amelia and myself safe. I need power, a lot of it for that. The servants of the Count's family dared to bully him because he was too weak. He needed to change himself. He was suspicious his fat was a byproduct of someone's ill intention, but he had no evidence to back up his claim. He believed, however, that he could become strong by training hard enough. Roy Badolf Baldwin might not be as talented as the rumors claimed him to be, after all. He was the son of a Count that disliked weaklings, and he knew he needed to become a sword master if he wanted to survive the disaster 3 years later. So he needed to get rid of his powerless status urgently and gain strength. But unlike the protagonist of Stallion novels, he didn't have a golden finger that would help him increase his strength faster than the most talented residents of this world. He called out the names of every golden finger he could recall in his mind and out loud, but nothing happened. No window popped up before him, nor did an ancient soul call out to him or bring him to their sea of consciousness. He went as far as to bit his finger and drip his blood on the black pendant around his neck, but again, he didn't gain some sort of law-defying treasure or technique or enter a space solely exclusive to him. When Amelia returned and saw the bite wound on his thumb, she immediately went out. After she came back, Roy noticed that her iron earrings were missing and there were meatballs in her hands. He was no fool. He understood that she had traded her personal accessories for food from the kitchen master, which she offered him. "Young master, if you're hungry, don't keep it in and wait for me to go away to bite on your thumb. You should never do that again, okay? Just tell me, and I will bring big meatballs for you every time." Amelia treated him like a little kid and handed the 2 meatballs over to him. She thought that her young master was getting better, but seeing how he had cracked open his skin to feast on his blood made her think that it was all her imagination. "Now, eat them before they go cold." Feeling utter defeated, Roy gawked at her. "She has misunderstood me. I didn't bite my thumb because I was hungry, but she thought otherwise. How can I make it clear to her now that she had already gone so far, however? I might as well eat them and thank her as if I truly mean it." He ate the 2 meatballs in mere minutes even though he was feeling full. "Thank you." He patted her fluffy head. "Anything for you." She beamed at him. Leveling endlessly with the strongest system. Chapter 7, Stabbed. The next day. Although disappointed, Roy concluded that he had no golden finger. But he had something better than that. And that was the knowledge he had about this world. He knew where he could find the treasures that could turn waste into a prodigy seen once in 100 years. Obtain items that could help him gain strength that others would acquire by training for 10 or more years, and what he needed to do to establish a connection with important people. But there was one thing stopping him from actually getting them. It was his inadequate strength. Beasts guarded the treasures and items. He didn't have the strength to steal a bone from a dog's mouth. He would die if he tried to face them in his current situation. Similarly, the important people he could establish connections with wouldn't even meet him because infamous trash like him can gain their attention even if he kneeled outside their doors. Before thinking of going for the treasures hidden in the far west or touching the hearts of people, he needed to have the strength of a mage or a knight. According to his information, there were many ways in which a person could gain strength in the far west. The first was to merge with a soul shard. This was the fastest way but not the safest. The second was to unearth a runic stone. It was similar to a soul shard in terms of the power it granted to the user, but one couldn't merge with it. They could only make it recognize them as its master by binding with it. A bound item, however, could only be used by a single person until death. Usually, personals, officials, and powerhouses traded these runic stones and soul shards at auctions at a high price. Roy couldn't afford to buy even the lowest quality soul shard or runic stone. Otherwise, he risked running out of the inheritance his mother left him on her deathbed. If his father suddenly kicked him out of the house or he had to leave the manor for some reason, then he would die a dog's death on the streets with his poor maid. I can't use the most common ways to gain power in this world. Then, what should I do? How should I increase my strength? Roy's eyes narrowed as he recalled the sentence mentioned again and again in Battlefield of the Ancient Gods, a novel that has gained tremendous success back on Earth in the year 2023. Ah, I remembered. Roy almost yelled out loud in his inner monologue. Thankfully, he didn't. Or else he would have startled his little maid. There was a way a useless fatty like him could gain skill, and that was the method of creating skills through repetitive actions. The novel's protagonist had gained most of his earlier skills through abusing this fact. The harder the action was for him, and the more time he repeated it, the higher the chance that he would gain the recognition of the world's will and end up creating a skill. This world was alive, and there was mana in the environment. Mana was the source of all magic. The protagonist used a special technique he gained from a cave where he also found the skeleton of an ancient expert to communicate with mana. Then, he induced it into your body, which was an excruciating process. Those with no affinity with mana could even die during it. The protagonist also felt heaven-rendering pain, but he endured it with sheer willpower alone. After he got used to inducing and having mana in his body, he used the mana in his vessel and his surroundings to force his mana pool and became a mage. Roy knew the skill the protagonist used to communicate with the world's mana. However, mana was poisonous to humans. The protagonist could absorb it into his body directly because he had gained a rare treasure from the corpse of the ancient mage. It was a ring that purified mana entering the protagonist's body from all the substances harmful to the human body. Roy didn't have the ring. He could only play with the mana inside mana stones. Mana stones contained purified mana. Amelia, take out a mana stone from the inheritance my mother left for me and bring it to me. What do you want to do with it, my lord? Wait, is a servant threatening you to give one to them? If that's so, I will teach them a lesson in your place and tell them not to eye your wealth any longer. What was she? His knight or maid? Amelia rolled up her sleeves, looking like she was ready to beat the bad wolves troubling her little fool. But her actions came off as silly in Roy's eyes. She was all skins and bones. How could she win against two arms? No, no one is threatening me. You should know that the best. You're always by my side. Have you seen someone come to make trouble for me in the past few days? No, right. As for why I want it, I should make it clear to you. I remember my father teaching me the basic meditation technique back in the day. I want to know whether I have an affinity with mana or not. The meditation technique the Count had given him wasn't worth much. Anyone could buy it if they had a gold coin or two in their purse. He was obviously the blood of the Count, but he didn't teach him the family secret technique as he feared someone would swindle it out of him. Thus, Roy was going to use the protagonist's meditation technique. It was better than the commonly found meditation technique. But since he had no way of explaining how he got it, he just told a white lie to Amelia. You remember it? With eyes as wide as saucers, Amelia looked at her little fool like a person looking at Jesus in disbelief. One must know that Roy Badolf Baldwin didn't say more than 10 sentences a day, and he couldn't hold a proper conversation with anyone but Amelia. And his vocabulary was at a basic level. So it was a surprise that he could recall or remember something like a meditation technique that was full of complex chants. After I fell into the pond and my head hit a stone, the fog covering my mind receded. It has become easier for me to understand others and talk with you. Haven't you discovered that? I also understand that I was a little lazy and stupid in the past, unbefitting of noble status. And this has led to you bearing great harm. I apologize for everything you've been through because of me. But I don't want others to trouble you or look down on me anymore. And sir, I now want to change. Roy clenched his fist. No. I promise you I will change. Shiny tears went down her cheeks. She had teared up after finding out it wasn't her imagination that her young master had become more intelligent. Now that he had said the words she had wanted to hear for over a decade, she couldn't help but sob more than 4,000 days of praying to the sun god. And today, her prayers have finally been heard. I will give my all to help you achieve your desire, my lord. Don't cry. Tears don't soothe your pretty face. Yes, my lord. She wiped away her tears with the back of her hand. Then bowed to Roy. I will bring one right away. She locked the door and took the painting of Roy's mother off the wall. Strapped behind it was a golden key. It wasn't just of a golden color but made of 24-karat gold. It was worth a nice amount. She then put it inside the keyhole that the painting was on the wall, hidden behind the painting. Click. The magic covering the wall disappeared temporarily. Roy and Amelia saw a vault appearing in place of the wall. It only needed her handprint to open up. It looks like his mother trusted her a lot. It contained deeds to farmland, a box the size of 4 hands, and a black glove inside a glass box, the likes of which gave Roy chills just looking for it. Amelia picked up the box and brought it to Roy. He opened it up and saw many blue gems glittering them. There were no gems but mana stones. A total of 24, he counted. Well, he just needed one. He pinched one with his fatty fingers and brought it out of the box. Then, he held it in his palm and started chanting out mumbo-jumbo that Amelia couldn't make sense of in a low voice. He didn't mind hearing this mystical chant, but it would be a problem if someone else heard it. So he kept his voice low. The protagonist was able to see blue dots representing mana after 10 minutes by using a meditation technique of an ancient mage. His talent was just that bad. However, Roy failed to sense mana even after half an hour had passed. Just how bad was his talent for mana? After 59 minutes of nothing happening, he was on the brink of believing that while born to an enchantress and a sword master, he had no affinity with mana. Amelia stood beside him, watching over him like a nanny. She had a desperate expression on her face as she silently prayed to the great sun, hoping that he would bless her young master with the ability to interact and control mana. Another 60 minutes passed. Just when he was about to give up and think of another way, he saw a blue dot in his darkened vision. He stared at it like a thirsty predator. As if he was king of thieves looking out to steal candy from a little girl, he immediately changed his ways and revealed a smile too pleasant like a spring of breeze. This blinding smile couldn't possibly be made by a human. Even Amelia felt that, not to mention the hint of mana that was attracted to Roy because of his stubbornness and persistence that had helped him continue to call out for mana for around 2 hours straight. The blue dot, as if enchanted by his shining teeth that were white solely because Amelia took great care of his mouth hygiene, went towards Roy. It entered his body. And then. Roy felt as if someone had stabbed his heart with a knife. Leveling endlessly with the strongest system. Chapter 8, The Golden Finger. Roy's sudden cry was loud enough to reach the sky. Unsurprisingly, no one came to check on him, not even a single servant. He didn't feel offended. Rather, he felt good after noticing no one knocking on or knocking over the locked room for his sake. The inheritance Lady Florence left behind for him was on full display in this room. He could tell with a single glance that the black glove was better than the land deeds and mana stones. Although he hadn't checked in detail what it was, he could still tell it was an item of great might, a runic weapon. If someone were to come in, they would catch the sight of his precious belongings. Though greed might get the better of them then. It was not hard for one to think how hellish Roy and his maid's days would become afterwards. The manor's servants and his stepmothers would try unhanded means to steal his inheritance from him. That's why neither he nor his maid wanted an outsider in this room at this moment. Thankfully, the servants, the count, and his family were alienating him, granting their wish. They might change their mind and come in this room to take a look at how I am doing if I continue making such loud noises. I need to silence myself. Although muddlehead because of the pain, Roy clenched his teeth to stop himself from releasing another beast-like roar. His hand reached out as if to take his life back from death's grasp. But no matter how far he stretched out his hand, he couldn't grasp anything in his ever-darkening vision. Just as he was about to give up, Amelia grabbed his hand, giving him the mental and physical support he needed to endure the soul-rendering pain. In this foreign world, there was a person by his side, worrying about him. If not for himself, then at least for her, he couldn't die. Not today. His bloodshot eyes burned with conviction. He did everything in his power to push the teardrop-sized mana out of his body. Only then did the pain traumatizing him stop. The blood leaking out of his eyes showcased what he had just been through. When she saw the blood coming out of his eyes, tears appeared in Amelia's eyes. She felt pain just by seeing him enduring everything in silence. She clenched her free hand and took it upon herself to make him never do that again, even if it meant forcing or begging him. My lord, you'll hurt yourself more if you continue to channel mana into your body. Please stop here. The pitiful voice entering Roy's ears came from the young girl standing beside him. He looked towards her and noticed that she appeared red in his vision. Everything appeared like so to him because of the blood in his eyes. You're right. I should stop. Although I don't like admitting it, I've no affinity with mana. How bad must one talent be to feel a knife stabbing him just by inducing a dot of mana in their body? Roy didn't know. But he was certain that a talent like him couldn't be found anywhere in this world. He was a one and only piece, a rare product that existed only in the Count's manor in the entire world. He wiped the blood from his eyes. Only after was he able to give her a close look over. Amelia, yet again, you're injured because of me. Roy's face quivered, for he noticed that her rough hand full of calluses and scars had become red because of how rudely he was holding it. It would be bruised soon. He immediately let go of it as gently as he could. It's fine. My lord doesn't need to blame himself. I'm used to pain. Amelia hid her pain behind a smile in order to not worry him. Why? Why didn't you free your hand from my grasp when I almost crushed it? This slave entire body is for my lord. I can bear a lot for you. This much doesn't even come close to what I can do for you. Just how far are you willing to go for me? If you just so say, I will give up my life for you willingly. Roy had heard tales of how some people lived and breathed just to serve another. Finding out that there was one such person for him too surprised him. Since she was treating him so well, he had to treat her with extreme care. At this moment, Amelia saw the weakness receding in Roy's dispirited eyes. Replacing it was a firm desire to change. You're like my limbs and eyes. Except for me, no one can have your life. No matter what, don't trade your life for mine. Can you promise me that? Your wish is my command, my lord. I will follow your will resolutely. Amelia wanted to get clean water for him so that he could clean the blood off his face, but he made her sit down on the bed. According to Roy Badolf Baldwin's memories, beneath the mana stones was a healing elixir. After rummaging through the box, he pulled out a vial the size of Amelia's small hands. It had crimson liquid inside of it and looked similar to a health potion in any RPG game. He opened its lids and poured some of it into his palm. Give me your hand. My master, it's too precious to use on this slave's body. You should save every drop of it for the future. It is indeed precious to me. But you mean more to me than this life-saving elixir. Either I will apply this on your hand right away or let it rot on the floor. The choice is yours to make. Roy held her by the shoulder to make it certain that she wouldn't be able to run away. A glint of light flashed past his eyes as he looked at Amelia with stubbornness. He was going to have his way with her whether she liked it or not. If he can't have his way with others peacefully, he will use force to make them obey him. My lord has become roguish after experiencing life and death. But I don't remember teaching him such things. Where did he learn the way of the tyrant? Maybe his personality changed because of hitting his head on a rock. Amelia had seen him grow from a baby to a young man. She had also grown up with him. She was only 4 years older than him. It was not wrong for one to say that she knew him in and out. But the one before her was unlike the person she knew. He was like someone foreign to her. But this person was also the one she hoped him to become ever since they met. Roy grinned. Am I a wolf in your eyes? Yes. After subconsciously replying to him, her lips parted ways, for she realized something truly important. Wait, did I just say out loud my thoughts? Yes, you did. Please punish me for my offense. She would have kneeled on the floor if not for Roy stopping her. You didn't need to remind me. I already have a punishment prepared for you. Roy punished his maid, who lacked the ability to hide her thoughts from him, by smearing the red potion on her hand. Although reluctant, Amelia let him apply the wet liquid to her bruising hand. The elixir wasn't good enough to make the imperfections on her hand with slender and long fingers disappear, but it killed the pain she was feeling. Thank you, my lord. She smiled when she saw how worried he was for her and felt warm in her heart because of the concern and attention he was showing her. She lost the special someone who would feel concerned over her health 12 years ago and had jumped into troubled water to protect him from the white-eyed wolves all alone when she was just a kid. Thus, she never had experienced what it meant to be treated kindly by another. And because he was a little fool, never in her wildest dream had she thought that she would look after him. But he had surpassed all her expectations and started to return her years of kindness bit by bit. Roy beamed back at her. You're welcome. Oh gosh. My lord smiled at me. I'm so happy I could die. Her thoughts were vivid on her face. She was like an open book to Roy. He smiled even more. The mana stone in his hand was still as bright as ever. He hadn't even extracted 0.1% of the purified mana inside it. It was still worth its original price. He placed it back inside the box before closing it. Then Amelia hurriedly put the things that others shouldn't see back in their hiding spot and sorted out the room. Roy knew that repetitively meditating for 7 days straight would help him gain a skill, for the protagonist had used the same method to impress the world's soul and earn a skill that helped him tremendously at the start of his journey. However, he had no talent for magic, and even purified mana was like poison for him. He had no choice but to head out and swing his sword in the training ground until the worlds will see how hard-working he was, pity him, and bless him with a skill. But he failed to stand up. His face turned red as he became embarrassed. But shouldn't he be used to it already? He made the redness in his face recede before calling out for his maid. Amelia. Yes. Help me stand. The sound of footsteps coming closer reached him. Do you want to go to the bathroom? Should I help you to the toilet? When he heard what she said, many embarrassing memories popped up in his mind. He could do number 1 just fine. But he needed someone to help him clean his body and do number 2. And in the entire house, the only one willing to do that was Amelia. She had literally helped him wipe his ass and take baths many times. Because Roy Badolf Baldwin was a blank sheet of paper and innocent like a pure angel, Amelia treated him like her son, and he didn't feel there was anything wrong with others seeing him naked or cleaning his butt. But the current Roy coughed when he mistakenly recalled the embarrassing memories of Amelia helping him with even this and that. He censored every such memory he shared with her in his mind. No, I am going out to grind. Just like noobs in any game, he, too, was fated to do the daily grind. Amelia blinked her pretty eyes at him in confusion. Grind? Grind what? Roy pointed at himself. Myself. Her little mouth widened to the size of an egg. Huh. Seeing her so confused was funny to Roy. He also found her too cute, just to his liking. While giving her a pat, he struck her with a blow of shock again. Yes, you heard that right. I'm going to the training ground to train. She snapped out of her daze and did her best to keep him inside. But young master, the temperature outside is too low. And it's the coldest on the training ground. You might get sick if you go there to train in this weather. It's all right. Nothing will happen to me. I'm feeling energized and full of strength. So don't you worry. The old Roy was weak. But maybe it was because their soul merged, but he could confidently say that it would not be impossible for him to train the sword. Please at least wear this. Roy wasn't only fat but also sickly. Amelia knew him best. He couldn't endure the rain or the cold. If he goes out like this, he will fall ill. Thus, she made him wear a thick jacket before allowing him to go out. She, of course, accompanied him as she didn't have it in her to rest after leaving him alone. Roy's brows furrowed. Just because of the few steps he took to step into the corridor, exhaustion assaulted him, and his breathing ragged. His physical condition was worse than he thought, but he shrugged the desire to rest off his shoulder, hardening his heart to reach his goal. All he cared about was getting a skill to protect himself from unexpected danger as soon as possible. After several minutes, he stepped out of the manor and descended the stairs to come before a fountain in the center of the garden. He went around it to head to the training ground. But on his way there, he stepped on something insignificant. He checked the sole of his shoe and saw a bee the size of his pinky writhing and squirming before breathing its last. Right then, he came to a sudden stop, making his maid wonder if he was troubled over unintentionally killing a bee. Of course, he wasn't. It was the bee's fault for flying beneath his shoes. He didn't feel a hint of guilt for unintentionally crushing it. The reason he stopped was that something unbelievable was happening around him. Even if he were to explain it to Amelia, she wouldn't believe him. The single dot of mana that he had seen after chanting for 2 hours straight appeared all around him before swelling up to a single spot several inches ahead of him and intertwining to take the shape of a blue screen. It was empty, but after blinking his eyes subconsciously, Roy saw words in it. By killing the creature of a world foreign to you, you have met the hidden condition necessary to unlock the strongest system. Congratulations. The strongest system is now bound to you. You've sneakily killed a bee. As a reward, you have gained 1 express and the mark of shadow has been etched into your soul. Roy. Leveling endlessly with the strongest system. Chapter 9, Endless Possibilities. The moment he finished reading the magically formed words within the blue screen, a sharp pain attacked him in the brain yet again. But this time, he didn't cry out or fall on his butt, for he didn't feel miserable for more than 1/10 of a second. It was safe to say that the pain emerging from the center of his brain vanished as soon as it came. What is this? Roy's eyes widened. There was more than just one foreign memory floating in his mind. Before he knew it, a large amount of information about the strongest system and the Mark of Night had drilled into his brain. The system was his key to becoming strong at a rapid pace. He just needed to level up. To level up, he needed experience points. He could earn them by killing anything living. Even stomping an ant to death would grant him XP at his current level. Every time he does level up, he would get a skill point and a stat point. Skill points could be used to learn any skill, even spells, while stat points would increase the qualities of his body, such as the strength he could bring out from within. As for the Mark of Shadow, it was his reward for the first kill. It was like a better version of soul shards. They can only merge with a person's body. But it had merged with his soul, granting him power that would follow him into another body if he ever chose to soul shift. In this world, even that was possible. But it was forbidden magic. And to do it, he had to become a mage. Unlike a soul shards, however, the Mark of Shadow didn't grant him any skills or superpowers. He was still as powerless as ever. On the bright side, it granted him an endless opportunity for evolution. Name, Roy. Age, 16 years and 9 months old. Express points, 1. Power level, body tempering stage 0 level, 0/10 express. Health, 2. Mana, 0. Strength, 3.5. Stamina, 1.5. Agility, 1. Perception, 5.5. Endurance, 1. Physical defense, 0.2%. Magical damage negation, 0.1%. The average stat of a fully developed human in this world was 5, meaning he was far less healthy than kids his age. He was also weaker than the servants of his manor. As for his stamina, it was better to not talk about it. His agility and endurance, it was even more pitiful than his stamina. Agility determined how fast he could move. Roy was wondering why he was as slow as a snail. But now it made sense to him. His agility was 4 points below average. On foot, he could only travel at that speed. He was still 16, but his conditions were worse than a balding baby. They are old people nearing the end of their lives. Endurance determined how much damage, be it magical in nature or physical, he could negate without doing a thing. He didn't have much endurance. So even healing magic was harmful to him as they radiated intense heat enough to give him burns. A typical person had enough magic damage negation to not worry about the side effects of major healing. But Roy couldn't survive it. No wonder the Count never called a magician to simply patch him up. If strong healing magic were to be used on him, he would die, and weak healing magic wouldn't perfectly solve one problem and also create another one for him. Although his stats were shitty, he was happy to see them as if he was a father who had gone out 3 years ago to buy milk for his baby, only to feel guilty and return home to see his boy all grown up and still waiting for him. ... Roy's poker face shattered as he grinned from ear to ear, but Amelia couldn't see the maniacal smile on his face as she was standing behind him. Thankfully she didn't, or else she would be bothered. Who wouldn't be if they see a fat man staring at thin air with eyes almost popping out of their sockets and smiling for no reason? Why was Amelia standing a bit away from Roy, who clearly didn't have a good sense of balance and could fall over at any time? It was the law of the Empire for the servants of a noble to stand 3 to 33 steps behind their master. But because Amelia was close to him, he had never disallowed her from standing 16 inches behind him. Still, she followed all the Empire's laws whenever she went out with Roy so as not to trouble him with helping her get away from punishment if someone caught the sight of them walking side by side and reported it to the Count. I was worrying too much for nothing. Roy was honestly depressed after believing that he lacked a golden finger. Because he didn't have a good starting point and lacked affinity with mana, he was certain that his future would be fraught with danger and hard work. He also knew that working himself to the bone would only push him to the entry level of a knight. That too would only be possible if he had a talent for swordsmanship. If he didn't, he was thinking of walking on a thin rope with his death on one side and great fortune on the other. Basically, he had planned to put himself at risk to pick up the treasure hidden in the wild infested with monsters. He knew the location of the soul shards that the characters of the novel were yet to find. He wasn't going to take everything from the main character and his harem, but he wasn't going to spare even lingerie or underwear for the villainesses and villains, respectively. Taking too many treasures of the Son of Heaven and his comrades might lead to their death, which in turn would bring a change in the future of the world as he knew it and make all his knowledge about the future events useless. But villainesses and villains were bound to die at the hands of the merciless protagonist. As they had shit for brains, couldn't keep their eggplants in their pants, and liked to court death every other day, they were short-lived. Roy didn't think it was wrong to take what was supposed to be there because, in his eyes, they existed to provoke the hero when he was weak, only to die later on at the hands of the person they embarrassed. The Goblin Grotto was the only treasure-filled place where not just any mob would be able to swat him to death. Roy had already planned to go there, for it was nearest to the county and hid a soul shard capable of granting its devourer great defense against physical and magical attack. Now that I have not one but 2 golden fingers, I do not need to go along with my crazy plan that guaranteed a 50% chance of my death at the hands of the weakest monster in the far west, a goblin. A grand desire blazed in his eyes. I will still go there because the soul shard's of impenetrable body is too great to give up on. It was the 13th day of the 6th month. On the 7th of the 9th month, the Child of River will get to it. That means, he still had around 3 months left to take it for himself. In 3 months, I need to become strong enough to take down goblins. Roy had stood still for too long, worrying Amelia. Are you tired, my lord? Would you like to go back to the room to rest? She asked. No. I am standing still, not because I am tired, but because I am admiring the scenery. Roy turned to her and placed his hands behind his back. Although I grew up under your care, you read me wrong this time. I hope you'll get better at reading me. Amelia's eyes showed horror as she bowed to him. This slave doesn't dare. Obviously it was wrong for slaves to think or guess what goes inside the head of their masters. It was a crime punishable by cutting off the tongue, gouging out the eyes, or imprisonment for 3 to 10 years. Nobles found slaves who would think freely quite revolting. Freedom of thought was the first step a slave could take towards actual freedom, after all. A slave dreaming of freedom. It was a revolting thought for nobles and royals. If they found any such slaves, they would beat them back into submission. That was their carrot method. If slaves didn't submit even after getting a beat down, then they would just off them, putting them to eternal sleep. A maid must know what her master is thinking at all times and not misjudge his desires. This is the best quality a maid could have. You're my maid, so you must be the best. Otherwise it won't be soon before you lack the quality to stand by my side. I am changing myself to get better, so you too must become someone worthy of the future me. Won't you reconsider? Roy was a man from the modern world, so he thought differently than the nobles. Others knew her as his slave, someone he could treat however he liked. But for him, she was the only reliable person he had in this world. She was too loyal to him, and it was his responsibility to help her become his backbone, someone he could lean on instead of kicking her down or leaving her in the dust. For that to not happen, he needed to shape her into an independent and strong woman who could think for herself and not just blindly follow him. Only this way would he repay her for what she had done for the old him. He started charging her mindsets by taking baby steps, helping her think freely. Amelia Natural had a strong desire to not be abandoned by Roy. I will do better next time. She immediately made up her mind, deciding to become a thoughtful maid for him. Work hard. Roy gave her a thumbs up. On the way to the training ground, he was whistling in happiness. They couldn't be seen because his face was too fat, but Amelia was certain that if he slimmed down, she would see dimples on his face because of how joyfully he was smiling. Seeing you so happy also makes butterfly fly in my stomach. But what among the things in this garden is the cause of your happiness? If you tell me, I will prepare it for you every morning. Amelia's greatest desire was to see him happy. If it was a flower that made him happy, she would always make sure to keep a fresh one on his bedside table from now on. If it was a plant, she had already made up her mind to buy a pot for him and place it by the room's window. Roy read her like a book. Her salary was hers to use. She shouldn't think of wasting it on him ever. He flicked her forehead gently, causing her to turn silent and look at him accusingly. I'm thankful, but you don't need to consider so much for my sake. He chuckled and raised his head to look at the clouded morning sky, hiding the sun from sight. I am just happy to be alive. Roy was just an average Joe back on Earth. He was studying and working hard to prepare for the Hunter Academy's exam. He dreamt of becoming a hunter. That was the greatest job with the highest pay rate and also the no-one death rate. But by becoming a hunter, he would be able to save the orphanage that didn't have the fund to continue functioning. The kind man running it had taken him in when he was dying on the streets. So he wanted to repay him at all cost. He had used much of his life taking care of others, so he deserved to be taken care of by someone in his old age. Thus, Roy chose to become a hunter over the others even though he could die. However, he died a violent death before making any of his noble aspiration come true. He thought that was the end, but he ended up in another world. He was alive. Although not well, he was in one piece. He didn't want to talk about the horror of having his body teared apart by a beast. He was going to do everything in his power to live through the disaster in this world. Only after dying did he realize the true value and preciousness of life. Leveling endlessly with the strongest system. Chapter 10. Experience points shooting up the bar. You've crushed an ant to death and gained 0.5 XP. Roy's eyes narrowed in satisfaction. It was exactly as he knew. He could gain EXP from literally everything as long as it was a living and breathing creature. Whether it was a poor little ant or a chicken didn't matter, he would get EXP from helping him ascend to the afterlife. He earned half the experience he would gain from reaping a bee's life by killing an ant. Killing ants give me less EXP than killing bees, but it's far less risky. Honeybees don't only attack invaders threatening to harm their nest, but also those who seriously disturb them outside their nest. I can get away with killing one, but if I hunted down several more, there's no saying how many of them will come to sting me to death. I don't risk the chance of poking the hornet's nest by slaying ants in my way. So it's better to kill them than bees. He saw not too many ants crawling on the tree he was approaching at a snail's pace. He covered his hand with a piece of clothes before reaching it. Then he placed his hand on the tree and acted like he was tired and out of breath to keep his real intentions a secret from prying eyes. You've squashed 2 ants to a paste with your palm. +1 XP gained. When he was inspired to become a hunter, Roy had watched thousands of videos in which a person or voice explained the weak points of monsters and their strength through actions and words, respectively. However, not a single piece of that knowledge was helpful to him at this moment. Rather, it was his common sense that allowed him to easily increase his experience points to a total of 2.5. I am short of 7.5 experience points to level up. I need to help 15 ants reach the afterlife to gain that much. Alright, let's get to work. He was all fired up and ready. After taking 7 steps, he saw a family of ants picking up leaves and taking them to their colony. I mustn't let them get away. Ants die for my sake. Your sacrifice will be remembered. He intentionally speed up, earning an immediate warning from his capable and attentive maid. My lord, please slow down or you will fall. Since the day had just begun, there were a lot of servants in the garden. They were watering the trees and the flowers, caring for them immensely. Crystal clear drop of water hung on the leaves and slid down the trunk of many trees and the outer shell of flower pots. Not a single servant considered it important to greet Roy as if he was not their lord but a bystander. Roy expected such an attitude for them, but he couldn't treat them as thin air even though he wanted to a lot. It will be weird if they caught him killing ants. Thus, he put up a show for them. My lord, please slow down or you will fall. He didn't take heed of her warning. And so, he fell down. Ah! He cried out, loud enough for the eyes of many to turn towards it. Not a single person moved to help him. They stared at him like he was a monkey in the zoo. Some servants laughed at his miserable state. Others snickered, calling him a stupid trash in their heart. Although he was a little fool, he was still a noble. They dared not curse him out loud as that would be like signing their death. My lord, are you all right? Amelia was stricken with horror when she saw him fall. Sadly she was too slow to save him from falling knees first on the ground. But she did immediately came up to him and helped him stand up, bypassing the Empire's rule of a slave always standing 3 steps behind their master. I'm fine. Roy showed her a smile and patted her head to ease her worry. Internally, he was hissing. He had bruised his knees. He didn't accept his body to be so weak that a stunt he had fakes to fool the masses would wreck him in return. Are you sure? Amelia asked about his health again in worry. I wouldn't lie to you. Roy gave her a reassuring smile before moving to the training ground as if he was immune to the stinging pain surging from his knees. Everything's going as I planned. 2 sharp rays of light flashes in his eyes that he narrowed out of habit, but it went unnoticed by everyone present. You intentionally made it seem like you tripped on your foot and fell down to the ground like a sore loser to your maid and the servants in the garden to hide from them the fact that you murdered her. Huge family of ants in cold blood by crushing them with your body weight so that they wouldn't think or spread rumors of you becoming a crazy young man who likes killing ants and bees. You get plus 8.5 express. You have acquired the skill, perception, for being thoughtful of your circumstances and vigilant to the ones backstabbing you. An unexpected surprise.